I'll know to start the meeting. Okay. Somebody's phone's ringing. Right, okay. Right, welcome to the new session of the Scrutiny Board, Environment, Housing and Communities. This is being called a consultative meeting, and hopefully I'll clarify exactly what's going to happen. Now, if my connection goes down today, Councillor Graham will then take over chairing the meeting, and then if Councillor Graham's link goes down, then Councillor Collins will then take over chairing the meeting, but let's hope we don't have to meet any of these eventualities. So this is a remote consultative meeting of the Environment, Housing and Communities Board. The public section of the meeting is being webcast via YouTube and accessible by following the links on the meeting webpage. A recent High Court ruling clarified that as of the 7th of May 2021, local authorities are now required to conduct physical meetings to take formal decisions. However, health and safety advice regarding COVID-19 means that under current arrangement, physical meetings must be limited to 90 minutes, and capacities in rooms 6 and 7 and the council chamber have been reduced. Scrutiny chairs therefore jointly recommended the first cycle of Scrutiny Board meetings in June should be conducted as a remote consultative meetings, which we feel will very similar to the remote public meetings we've been used to over the last year. You should be aware, however, that under this consultative arrangement, we will not legally be able to take any formal decisions, and the consultative status means that some of the usual formalities will not take place at the start of the meeting. Should any decisions be taken that require formal ratification, such as recommendations to the Executive Board or those relating specifically to statutory functions, those will be referred for formal approval at the next physical public meeting of the board. So, are there any declarations of interest that need to be recorded, particularly in respect of the new code that we're all adhering to? No. Okay. There are some apologies, but they don't have to be, they're not going to be formally mentioned. In terms of the minutes, has anybody got any matters arising from the minutes? Because there is no need to formally ratify them today. Anybody get any questions, queries or observations on the minutes? Okay, so in that case, we will then move on to item 5. So Becky. Oh, I'll tell you what I'll need to do first is introduce everybody. That would be a good start, wouldn't it? I'm Councillor Barry Anderson. I represent Adelaide Wharfdale and I chair this particular scrutiny board. So, Councillor Akhtar.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Javed Akhtar, London and Woodhouse.
Okay. Councillor Blackburn. Anne's there. If she's, we'll come back to Anne in a minute. Councillor Brooks.
Good morning, Councillor Kayleigh Brooks, Little London and Woodhouse Ward.
Councillor Charlwood, is she in the call now? No. Councillor Collins.
Good morning, Councillor Dawn Collins, Horsforth Ward.
Councillor Dobson.
Good morning, Councillor Mark Dobson, Garforth and Swillington Ward.
Councillor Finnegan.
I'm Robert Finnegan. I'm a councillor for the Morley North Ward.
Councillor Gabriel.
Hi, Angela Gabriel, councillor for Beeston and Holbeck.
Councillor Graham.
Morning, Councillor Pauline Graham, Crossgates and Winmore Ward. And Chair, I had this yesterday with the video. It just seemed to come on eventually.
Right. That's fine, thank you. Councillor Howley,
Good morning, Chris Howley, councillor for Wheatwood Ward.
Councillor Midgley,
Councillor Matthew Ward.
okay. Councillor Reagan,
Councillor Denise Reagan, good morning from Bermondsey and Richmond Hill Ward.
Councillor Ritchie,
Morning, everyone. Councillor Kevin Ritchie, Bramley and Stanningley Ward.
and Councillor Smith.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Trish Smith, Pudgey Ward.
I'll get the officers to introduce themselves as and when we come to the session.
But
So,
can I come in now?
yes, yeah,
Councillor Anne Blackburn, Foundling Wortley Ward.
thank you. Right, so Becky, do you want to introduce yourself and then take on item 5, please?
Becky Atherton, Principal Scrutiny Advisor. Item 5 is the Scrutiny Board Terms of Reference. Members are asked to consider the report, which provides updated details of the board's remit. This is the report that's brought to the board every year after the AGM, and you're just asked to note the changes regarding digital access and the contact centre, which will now be under strategy and resources.
All right, so are we happy to note that? Yep, good. So if we move on to item 6, the performance report. So what we've got before us here is the council's most recent performance update, and you are now invited to ask questions of officers and the relevant executive member. So if I can ask the following people to introduce themselves. Councillor Harland.
Hi. Morning, everybody. Councillor Mary Harland, representing Kippets and Methler. I'm here today as Executive Board Member for Communities. Much of the progress report is obviously in the past, which I'm recently appointed as Exec Board Member for Communities. And it's nice to see my ex-colleagues on this scrutiny board.
Councillor Rafiq.
Morning, everybody. Councillor Mohammed Rafiq, Chapel Alton Ward, and I'm here in my capacity as the Exec Board Member for Environment and Housing, in particular in relation to the housing portfolio. Thank you.
Councillor Hayden.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Helen Hayden, Councillor for Temple Newton Ward, and here today as Executive Member for Infrastructure and Climate.
Okay, Mr Evans isn't able to make it, so Mr Rogers.
Morning, James Rogers, Director of Communities, Housing and Environment.
Okay, Mr Rollett.
Good morning, Tim Rollett from the Council's Intelligence and Policy Service. I'm standing in for my colleague Emma Camillo Price, who was the person that coordinated the production of the report.
Okay, Mr Crampton.
Good morning, Adam Crampton, Head of Property Management for Housing.
Okay, Naheem Rui Khan.
Good morning, everyone. Naheem Rui Khan, Head of Strategy and Investment in Housing Leeds.
Okay, Sean Flesher, who doesn't appear to be in the call. Gerard Tinsdale.
Good morning, everybody. Gerard Tinsdale, Acting Chief Officer for Housing Leeds.
Fine. And is Jason Singh in the call? If not, I noticed that Mr Woolmer has come up. So, John, do you want to introduce yourself? As in John Woolmer.
Good morning, everybody. John Woolmer, Acting Chief Officer covering Environmental Services.
Okay. Mr. Philip Steele.
Philip's not here today. I'll be standing in for Philip.
As well, right. And is Kate Morris in the call? Kate is the new Head of Transport Planning. And
she's coming from another meeting, Councillor Anderson. She will be with us shortly.
Right, fine. We'll introduce her more formally then. Right, so you've got the report in front of you. So what I'll do is I'll try and go through it as professionally as we can. So if we start on page 35 of the copy that I have in front of me, I accept that sometimes when you've got electronic copies, the page numbering isn't always the same. So anything on page 1, which is about housing and the HRA business plan? Anybody get any questions? If you can indicate either by raising your hand or give me an indication that you would like to speak. Anybody get anything on that page? Okay. If we move over to page 36, anybody get anything they would like to question on page 36? No. Page 37. Page 38. Page 39. Page 40. Yes, Councillor Gabriel. You're still muted, Councillor Gabriel. Yeah.
It's hard when you're trying to read the minutes on one screen, look at you on another screen, find me blooming thing. Right, so I was talking about temporary accommodation. You may remember that I have asked for this for the last 3 years and 3 officers, and I'm asking for a list of how many temporary accommodation properties there is in my ward.
Gerard?
Yeah, we can certainly provide that, councillor. I mean, just on the number of temporary accommodation within the city at the moment, the numbers now are predominantly under the 40 mark. We did have a significant increase throughout the pandemic. Numbers got up to 240, 250 at one point, but temporary numbers in Leeds extremely low, particularly when you benchmark as against some of the other key authorities that have a number of thousands in tier, and as I've said, Leeds under 40. But Councillor Gabriel, I'll provide that information to you.
I'll hold you to it because your other senior officers before haven't managed to do it, Jared. So you're on a warning.
Right.
I'll be there today.
I've got Councillor Ritchie and then Councillor Smith, and it looks as though she's meaning to have raised her hand. So I've got Councillor Ritchie, then Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, a couple of questions. Firstly, on adaptations, are there any plans to increase the any extra capacity in dealing with adaptations? Obviously, this cohort of customers will have been disproportionately hit by COVID. I think it's really important that we focus. I recognise the catch-up that's gone on, but there's clearly a backlog and may need some extra capacity. So that's the first question. The second question under bullet point 15 is under the decency standard. You give us some figures there. I wondered if it's possible to have ward variation, because it might be different throughout the city. And then digging into those, if that's possible, actually within the wards, any sort of estate variations as well, because we might find that there's actually pockets of, poor disrepair or poor standards that need a bespoke solution. So that's a ward breakdown and within wards as well, if possible. Thank you.
Gerard?
Absolutely, councillor. I'll work with the team and see how much we can break down those decency figures within wards, and then if we can break them down further than that within those estates, we'll provide that information too. I'll just have to check with the team whether we've got it at that level, councillor. In terms of adaptations, similar to other areas of work, we have had pressures due to COVID and the lack of contractor availability, but we are working with the market now to try and enhance that, and predictions currently suggest that we'll be back on track and within normal performance areas by the end of the financial year.
Okay, right. Councillor Smith's going to come in on the next page. So Councillor Gabriel.
Yes, mine was about encampments. Do you remember a few years ago, Barry, we actually did traveller services,
yes,
and the recommendation that we would have some more temporary sites throughout the city. I'm aware that as far as I know, there's still no temporary sites throughout the city. So when travellers come onto a grassed area or the park, we have nowhere to send them, and all we're doing is moving them around the city. And South Leeds particularly, Beeston and Holbeck, we've suffered with a lot since Christmas. So I wondered who is actively trying to find sites where 2 or 3 caravans could go for a week or a month, that's agreed by everybody.
Right, I don't know whether Gerard or James wants to take this, but Gerard's unmuted himself, so presumably he's taking on the pass.
Thank you, Councillor. And I understand the challenges within a number of wards that have been created throughout the pandemic, and the restrictions it's placed on travellers to be able to move more freely than would like and attend other events, which would have taken or would have potentially reduced the numbers in Leeds. That said, trying to increase the number of negotiated sites is an area of work that we're now recommencing. We had started looking at it just before the pandemic kicked in, and unfortunately it had been delayed while we were dealing with other issues, but it's something we're going to focus on now. And there's a couple of areas within the city that we're looking at, and we'll be talking to ward members separately to make sure they're comfortable with the areas that we think might be a possibility.
That's right.
In our ward, we've got quite a few with the South Bank that we think could fit in well, that's derelict land now, that may be used for temporary sites until it's built on. So
we can certainly,
members.
yeah, we'll certainly take that on board, Councillor, and speak to you.
Right, Councillor Akhtar.
Yeah, I've got a couple of points or questions, shall we say. One, it just came to our attention just recently, some of our blocks, especially the PR5 blocks, where we are charging the service charges to our local residents, but the service hasn't been delivered. For example, typical example, window cleaning on a 15-story high block, and according to local residents, that has never happened, but unfortunately the residents are still paying the service charges. Second point, I mean, would you agree with me, Gerard, that some of these blocks, when they were built, they were not built for the cars, and some of the blocks that we've got, I know it's going to fall in with the parking issue, but because we're talking about the council estates and the council flats, I mean, the capacity on some of the blocks is 15, 20, 30 cars, while we've got like 300 families living in 3 blocks, for example, in Lowell Parks. Are there any plans to utilize some of the lands that we have nearby to have extra car spaces?
Gerard?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not aware of any plans at this moment in time within the service to increase the parking provision in our blocks. That said, Councillor, as we move towards bringing other properties online, potentially other high-rise blocks in the part of the city, enhanced parking levels is something that we're certainly looking at. It's really challenging in terms of parking provision for those residents living in the blocks, and we do work with partners to try and enforce that, to make sure that people are parking appropriately, and other people that have no right to park there don't park there. I'll have to pick it up with the service in terms of whether or not we're looking to widen any areas, and I'll come back to you on that. In terms of the window cleaning question that you've asked, I'm sorry I haven't got an answer to that right now. I'm going to have to check with the team and provide you with a written update, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, right. So on page 41, I know Councillor Smith wants to come in on page 41. And anybody else on page 41? Yeah, so Councillor Smith and then Councillor Reagan.
Thank you, Chair. So I know I've raised this separately with officers in the past. Para 17 and Para 21. So the responsive repairs completed right first time, I think is severely lacking and continues to be lacking. And then the average relet times. Now, I know that there was a plan in place to make sure that all of the better standards were met before a relet. But again, I think it's taking too long. We're seeing too many voids and too many residents desperate for housing. So I'd like comments on that, please, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Our void numbers have increased slightly throughout the pandemic. We're around about 1.3% in terms of our stock levels at the moment, and our target is to try and keep our void levels under 1%. The challenge has been in trying to get the properties up to a lettable standard so that we can allocate them and do that within the COVID limitations that we've got. As restrictions reduce, we certainly think we'll be able to start turning our properties around quicker. And just over the last month, the service has already started allowing potential new tenants to look at the properties before the repairs are actually carried out. That's something that we hadn't been able to do throughout the pandemic, but our new risk assessments are allowing us to do that. So we're hoping that work as well will help to reduce those void numbers that you're seeing in the areas at the moment. And I think it's fair to say as well that we've had a challenge, particularly with COVID and Brexit, in terms of our supply chains and getting materials in so that we can actually bring the properties up to a lettable standard, and that's another area that we're working with partners to try and resolve. In terms of the properties being in a decent condition when our tenants move in, we've just diverted funds this year, and they're running a pilot, which we're referring to as our blank canvas approach, which is where we're going to actively do more work in the properties, and for example that would be stripping the walls so that we can identify defective plaster. We can get the property up to the right condition before people move in, so that they're moving with a home that they're happy with. They can quickly get some paint it, and hopefully everything will be great. And we'll be monitoring how that goes over the next 2 to 3 months. And hopefully that will see some significant improvements. I think there was one other question you asked me, Councillor. I'm sorry, I don't seem to have made a note of it.
No, there were really just two, but
okay.
they were surrounding that. But I know that I'm particularly aggrieved, still waiting for 9 weeks for a void property to be able to be let to a family who are in absolute dire straits. I just, I understand the constraints, but I think 9 weeks is just too long.
Yes, Councillor, I agree too. And we have had these conversations within the service, and we are looking at where we can possibly allow new tenants to move into properties and then carry out some of those works around them once they've moved in. That's something we'll do, particularly if they're in dire circumstances, as you said, Councillor.
Okay, right.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Reagan and then Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is, it links into paragraphs 17 and 18, but it also then links into the disrepair issue, because it's great that you can see on this page that we're remaining strong and above the 90.50% response, but my recollection is that that's not right, because it's not first time repairs are done, and we've got residents that are waiting weeks and weeks to get contractors in and to get subcontractors in and to get suppliers of specifically for windows and specialised things that is going on, that then leads to a disrepair claim. So I think we need, or you as a housing department need to look at this really, really quickly and try and alleviate some of these issues.
Thank you, Councillor. And there is some significant work taking place to try and reduce disrepair and also improve satisfaction and get repairs done right first time. Adam, who's leading on it's on the call right now. Adam, I don't know if you just want to give Councillor Reagan a brief update on that.
Yeah, certainly, and linking back to Councillor Smith's question as well, I think you touched on it in your earlier response, Gerard, about some of the issues that we are having in supply chains, and it's been extremely well documented in the media over recent weeks that these are global issues, certainly not just Leeds issues that we are facing, and it's everything from plaster to timber to concrete, and obviously you've highlighted there, Councillor Reagan, about windows and composite doors in particular, and it's having a massive impact on the service, and we do need to acknowledge that. And certainly we've seen a significant increase in the number of complaints that we've had in relation to some of those timescales. So it's not something that we are in any way naive to, and doing a lot of work, particularly around our communications to tenants, to make sure that we are making sure that people are updated as best as we possibly can, because it's putting a major pressure on the service. Around the kind of disrepair prevention agenda, one of the things that we are really keen to do is focus on not talking about disrepair prevention, but talk about improving the quality of our homes. And that's very much the focus of what we're trying to do, not just within property management, my service, but across housing, linking very much into that holistic approach with our colleagues in housing management, with our colleagues in strategy and investment, right across the service, to make sure that's a key priority for the service. And obviously the quality of our repair service is a major driver for that. You know, we do look at the KPI suite and some of the limitations within our KPI suite. Colleagues on the call and members on the call will be aware that we commence a new contract with an external contractor in the west of the city from the 1st of October, and the south is moving internal to Leeds Building Services from the 1st of July. And a major focus as part of those new specifications has been a complete rewrite of our KPI suites, to make sure that we have that improved assurance that we are accurately measuring the outputs to the customers, and that we can identify any trends where we need to put additional focus, be it in particular geographical areas, particular trades, or where we have particular pressures on, like I say, things like construction materials. So absolute assurance that there's an awful lot of work going on to make sure that we address all those concerns, Councillor Reagan.
Okay. Right, Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Chair. I'm referring to, again, responsive repairs, item 16. First of all, the report states that there was 68.68% in March. I know that obviously this is a quarterly report, but I'd like something a bit more updated on that, because as has been stated, there seems to be problems there. And yes, I accept if there's problems getting materials, but nevertheless, it's the tenants at the end of the day that are stuck waiting for repairs to be done. So, you know, I accept what's just been said, that the officers are doing all they can. But in what Adam's just stated about a new contract from the 1st of October in West, and from what he says, I gather that this new contractor, the new contractor is now knows, or the result of who's got this contract is now being announced. But I, as one of the councillors in West, have not been informed, and I would like to know, because in the past and still I have had problems with Mears. So I would like to know, is it still Mears or is it someone else? So I'd like updating on that, please. And I actually think that all the councillors who come under that area should be informed of who the new contractor is. And I have one other thing, but if you can just tell me, Chair, the other thing I want to mention is actually on number 23, but I realise that you haven't got to item 23 yet. So
back in again, because I'm just about to go over there.
Yes.
So Adam,
okay, I'll leave it at that for a minute, then I'll come back in after. Thank you.
So Adam, can you give us an exclusive?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, if I may address the first question first, Councillor Anderson, around item 16, which is repairs completed within timescale. The number quoted there, the 68.68%, Councillor Blackburn, is the cumulative annual figure for the year. And I really want to just kind of put some context to that. Obviously, it was the 23rd of March 2020 when we went into our initial lockdown, so right at the start of the financial year. And at that point, we made a clear decision as an authority, as a service, that we would continue to record all repairs that were reported to the service. So although we were only completing what we referred to as essential repairs at that point, so that's emergency and priority repairs, we were continuing to record all repairs that came through the contact centre. Now that's quite a significant point, because although we weren't unable to complete any of those repairs in line with the national guidance, in order to give ourselves that context of what the level of backlog would be as we moved out of lockdown and out of restrictions, we did record all those on the system. Now we've done awful lot of work with peer groups and with benchmarking groups, and I'm pleased to report that put us in a very strong position compared to a number of our peers, who many of which reverted to emergency repairs only. Our offer was slightly more generous than that, around essential repairs, and where repairs did not meet that emergency criteria, the vast majority of our peers were not recording them. They were asking people to call back when restrictions were lifted. So although obviously a figure of 68% is not a great cumulative figure for the year, I think that context is really important, because right from March we were recording repairs that we were not able to start undertaking until towards the back end of the calendar year. So that's the context around the repairs completed within timescale target. Around the West contract, it has now been published that MEAs have been successful in winning the West repairs contract. I would like to absolutely emphasise that is not a continuation of the existing contract. The contract that is now in place is in year 11 of a contract. So it's been a real legacy contract for that part of the city and of course the south as well. The new contract that begins on the 1st of October is a completely new set of specifications. It's a completely different set of rates. It's a completely different set of expectations and KPIs. It is absolutely not a continuation of the contract that is in place now. There's a lot that we've learned over that period, and we certainly don't intend to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but is it a new start? And there's an awful lot of work taking place already, although we're still some months out from go live in that contract, about mobilising on this new set of expectations and new set of rates.
Thank you. Right, so
Chair,
yeah.
can I just come in there?
Yeah.
Can I ask what the new specifications are, or should I say what the new specifications are, and in which way they're different to the previous ones? Because I'm just concerned now what's been said to me, that West has still got MEAs, because I have, over the time that we've had MEAs, had problems. I'm very keen that when they do go to do a job, that they send the right person to do it, which has not always been the case. It's amazing some of the tradesmen that's appeared to do other jobs and actually then have come. They've only sent somebody just to tick the box to say they've sent somebody. Many a time that person cannot do the job, so they go off again and then send someone else. And as I said, there is problems there, and with subcontractors and all sorts of problems, and many a time the standard of work. But anyway, I'd just like to know what these new specifications are, please.
If there's a lot also, madam, if there's a lot of changes, could you speak to those people, could send a briefing paper to those that are affected by it? If there's only one or two changes, fine, but if there's a number of changes, then it would be better to be done via a briefing note, I would have thought.
Yeah, certainly, Councillor Anderson, and from a granular sort of technical level, there are an awful lot of changes, and I'd be more than happy to provide a briefing on that.
Yeah.
As a real summary, though, I think the example that Councillor Blackburn used there was around just sending someone in order to say that they've been, even if that person wasn't able to complete the job. And listen, I'm absolutely convinced that is not kind of the commonplace, but nonetheless, we do hear those examples, and I think that's maybe a symptom of where we've found ourselves in terms of the suite of KPIs now, where if we're being really critical, we have found ourselves in a position that it's more important to get a tick in a box than it is an outcome for a customer, and I think that's been a real emphasis on the new suite of KPIs moving forward.
That's fine, thank you. Right, now, Councillor Brooks indicated first on page 42, and then I'll bring in Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Chair. I've also had issues with mine, just so you know. So, yeah, page 42. I see that there's going to be an online check-in approach, which is good. Like, I think that can reduce a lot of the pressure on the service for those that have got the internet and can access that service. I think like in terms of the prioritization for the visits, though, like how exactly are you going to identify those people to make sure that people don't fall through the gaps? Because I suspect that this increase of complaints is due to people not flagging things up as they arise a bit more, and not being as things not being picked up and then getting more severe, at least in part. So that's the first thing. And then it says during March a number of operational issues were identified within the service. I just want to know what those operational issues are and what you're going to do to fix them, please. Thank you.
Gerard?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, the report highlights the move away from annual home visits to annual tenancy contacts, and part of that process, Councillor, that we're piloting this year to see if it works and it's effective, is the ability to allow customers to self-serve and check in with us, but we will still be continuing to make contact with our customers through a variety of different means, potentially over the phone, as we've found worked quite well this year, but certainly in terms of actually crossing the threshold and carrying out visits in the properties. In terms of how we prioritising those people that we feel we need to cross the thresholds, it's if we're aware of particular issues, any safeguarding concerns. It might be nobody's been in contact with the service, they used to pay the rent well, they're not paying the rent. Maybe neighbours have let us know that they've got concerns over people. There's a variety of different methods, I think, is what I'm trying to get at, Councillor, to help us to pick that up and prioritise them.
Okay. Right, Councillor Blackburn?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I had a second question that hasn't been answered.
Sorry, Councillor, refresh my memory. Which part was that?
What exactly were the operational issues that were identified, and how are you going to fix them?
Yeah, we've had some challenges in terms of the last year in terms of reducing our workforce. We've reduced the numbers across the service, and as part of that, we've merged some teams together. So we've moved our enhanced income team across into the housing offices to support the larger number of general housing officers we've got in the service, and as part of that, we've had to train those staff to get up to speed to do it. We've also had to make sure that we've got robust risk assessments in place as well, so that we can carry out those visits, for example, in a COVID safe manner, and just some challenges around getting the data together, which we've now managed to acquire.
Okay, right, Councillor Blackburn.
Yes, thank you again, Chair. I just want to comment on the fact that it seems that no visits are going to be done now, or only in certain circumstances. And I remember, as some of you will probably, that these annual home visits started because it was a case, in some cases, tenants were subletting. In some cases, certainly in my ward, there have been cases of cannabis where the tenant had moved out and then decided to grow a cannabis farm there, and of course still paying the rent or whatever, and the whole reason for these annual visits was to be so that someone could go in and at least see that things was okay. I accept that they couldn't be there all the time, so there could still be some matters may be wrong, but at least it was a person entering the property. And what you probably find as well, that if they were nearby, someone else would probably say something to them if things weren't right. But at the end of the day, how can you see what is going on there just by a phone call? Do you honestly think that tenants are going to ring up and tell you if they're doing something that they're not supposed to do? Because if you think that, I think you're on a different planet to the one I'm on. I think it's important that we do this. I know about, employees and change and not as many in different departments now, etc., etc. But it's something that we should be doing for our own sake, as well as the tenants there. We need to find out if our properties are as they should be, i.e. that the people that are tenants there are actually living there, etc., etc. So we do need to do that, and it is only once a year. So, and it is important to the tenants. It's all right, you're saying about the employees of housing and making things easy for them, but at the end of the day, it's the tenants that pay your wages, and they deserve this service. And as far as I'm concerned, they should get it. Thank you.
Right, I don't know who wants to take on that one, Gerard?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I just think it's useful to reassure everybody that we're not moving away from crossing the thresholds of our customers' homes, and we do that in a variety of methods for a number of reasons, not just the annual home visit process. And I think there was a valid point made about how do we know if we don't cross the threshold, what's going on in a property. And while we will be talking to customers, talking to colleagues, and finding information out from different methods, part of our priority process will be over the coming years, if we've not accessed the property, either be it through annual tenancy contacts, or because we've carried out a repair in there, or we've gone to speak to them over tenancy issues and the like, we'd then be looking to ensure that we did get into those properties at some point in the future. But just to be clear, we still intend to be going into our customers' properties.
Okay, right. Anything more on page 42? If not, if we go, so then page 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 47. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of questions. Question and a point. Housing benefit expenditure at 207 million dropped to 290 million. Do we have a breakdown of how much is to the private rented sector versus our council housing sector? I think that might be a powerful line in trying to persuade government to support council housing further, because, you know, when you're looking at the costs of housing benefit to private landlords, that money be better invested in council housing and social rents, which actually balance over the lifetime of the house, doesn't it? That's the first question. And the second point is about the table at the bottom. I always go back to my GCSE physics days, and the teacher always said, always put your units in. So what are the units for these new claims? Is it days? Is it weeks? Months? Something else? And that's throughout the report as well. I've noticed it in other places. Thank you.
Right. So on the first one, who is, James. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Lee unfortunately is not able to be with us today because he's ill. So in terms of the first question, we will be able to differentiate between the sort of council housing sector and the private rented sector. So we can get those figures for you and provide them separately, not a problem at all. And in terms of that chart and the claims, it's days, I believe. 99.9% sure on that.
Do you want to come back again, Kevin?
Oh, yes, thank you for those responses. I did want to say actually about the welfare rights team. I do believe it's the best council service that we have. You know, it's absolutely fantastic. The outcomes they deliver for people and for members, I think, you know, in terms of solutions, are first class. I've never ever been let down, and there's been various officers, and every time an officer leaves, I think, crikey, I hope the next one's as good, and you know, they have been to a person. So I just want to get that positive feedback across, and you know, other departments could learn from them. They're an exemplar service. So well done and keep it up.
Okay. Anything else on page 47? 48. 49. 50. 51. 52. 53. 54. 55. 56. 56, Councillor Ritchie.
It's actually starts on 55 as it happens, or a bit slow getting to the raise hand button. Yeah, it's about the bin collection rates. I've had lots of correspondence with John and his team on this one. But I think it's important to bring it to the attention of the Scrutiny Board, some of the problems that I think are current. And I do accept that the issues around COVID have put a lot of challenges on staff, and appreciate the fantastic work that they've done throughout the period of COVID. But there are just a couple of fundamental issues that need tackling from a management perspective. And that's in terms of assisted collections. There's been a lot of individual failures, which appears to be down to communication with backup crews. And it really needs resolving. So you get backup crews who aren't familiar, and for some reason they're missing, quite often repeat misses as well on assisted collections. Again, vulnerable residents, so that needs addressing. And the other thing is, the end of day report are a fantastic idea and initiative. However, they're somewhat lacking in often finding that streets aren't actually on there. And, you know, as members of the public will come to us and we'll get them added on. So that just raises a bit of a question about the stats in terms of miscollections and how you work those out. Is it on reported miscollections, or is it on the actual figures? But I'm not sure how you'll get them if people then don't re-report the streets. Thank you.
John, as in John Wilmer.
Thanks, Councillor.
And thanks, Councillor Ritchie. Yeah, pick up those 2 or 3 points then in turn. So yes, fully recognise the fact that the challenges that COVID in particular has brought the service over the last 15 months has led to some issues that that you've mentioned. So some assisted collections not being done, and issues around end of day reporting not including all the streets that they should. And both of those issues are related to, as you say, the challenge of the pandemic and mainly around having to crew up a lot of backups. So when we send backup crews out where we can, often they are crews that are unfamiliar with the route or could be driving hire vehicles. So we've had a lot of issues to do with vehicles because of the pandemic. So to give an example of that, if the crew working in a bubble, one of those crew members becomes symptomatic, we stand the whole bubble down until we resolve that issue, and then the vehicle itself must be deep cleaned, and therefore it's taken out of service probably for the day. So we've got a disproportionate amount of hire vehicles at the moment. We have an issue there with the use of in-cab technology in those hire vehicles, which we're trying to look at longer term, but we haven't resolved yet in terms of the current operations. So those sort of factors combining are leading to a reduction in service that we wouldn't want under normal times. Just to reassure you around some of the measures we're taking to try and improve things, and I do think things have improved a little in terms of the assisted collections in particular. We've been communicating with staff around the importance of those and explaining why they should be priority. The team leaders across the service have been tasked to prioritise making sure that if a scratch or a backup crew go out, the emphasis is on the assisted collections and the importance of those. But I do recognise that there's still things falling through gaps, and we'll redouble our efforts on those. Those that have assisted collections are obviously, by the nature of the collections, some of the most vulnerable and people in the city. So we recognise the fact that needs to be done better. The end of day reporting, similar really there. Again, I can't disagree that there are some streets that are not appearing on the end of day reports, and thankfully, councillors such as Councillor Ritchie and Councillor Anderson and others on this on scrutiny will be making us aware of those, which is appreciated. And again, we're trying our best to work through that with crews in terms of the importance of recording everything. But again, some things will fall through gaps where there's been a midday transfer, if you like, of a collection of a route, where this week, for example, we had 2 crews had to be stood down within a couple of hours of the day because of a COVID-related issue. A couple of people being tested positive in the service, which led to some issues this week. So yeah, recognise those issues. We'll redouble efforts around those, and I'm happy to provide any information to any members around what actions we're taking and whether that wants to come through scrutiny. I'm fine with that. And then the last point was around the end of days. What was the last point, Councillor Ritchie?
It was just about having confidence in those figures, the 99+%, if we're not recording all the missed streets, really. I probably didn't want very clear on it, but
yeah, no, down, so I've forgotten, sorry. Yeah, just to be clear, the statistics we provide through the performance reports have always been based on, as you suggested, the reports of missed bins by the public. That's the government, the national performance measure that's used by all councils across the country. So there's a consistency in terms of councils, I suppose, comparing each other as performance. So yes, that's always been part of the issue. And I know it's been a discussion at scrutiny before around the usefulness of that in terms of that's not the actual number of misses we've recorded, it's what's been reported. I think the other point, just contextually to add, and I know we've discussed this before at scrutiny and had a debate around it, members have raised, but from a statistical viewpoint, in terms of the service commitment, we still regard a miss as something that we haven't therefore recovered the collection after another 48 hours. So that's our service commitment, that there will always be, pandemic or no pandemic, issues that will mean we can't collect bins on the scheduled days. That's obviously what we'd always want to do, but our service commitment is to return within 48 hours of the scheduled day. If at that point we haven't gone back to us, then that is a failed collection. But and as I say, that's always been a bit of a bone of contention with members around, and we understand that for the public perception that if your bin's not collected on the day it was meant to be, then it's been missed. But from the viewpoint of performance management and making sure that we are collecting it in a reasonable time, we use that 48 hours rule. I hope that helps.
Okay, right. So I have Councillor Graham, then Councillor Blackburn. Now, Councillor Reagan, your blue pen was going back and forth in front of the television. No, it wasn't you, right? And so then it's Councillor Graham, Councillor Blackburn, then Councillor Howley.
Thank you, Chair. And John, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you and your team, because yes, we have had missed bins, missed assisted collections, but every time that it's been reported, it's been dealt with more or less immediately. And I think you're doing a fantastic job under these circumstances. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Dialing on my phone, at least then I know that's...
Okay, right. So I've got Councillor Blackburn, then Councillor Howley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Two things. First of all, continuing from what Councillor Ritchie stated about the assisted bin collections. I've had two that I've reported today, but what really concerned me was one elderly lady rang up and said to me that she actually run out, or maybe walked out, because the lady was in her 80s, when she saw obviously the other bins had been taken and not hers, and said, well, can't you wheel mine out? I'm on the list to have them done. And apparently she was told, oh no, it's not our job to do that. That's exactly what she told me. So I think it's probably an agency staff person, I don't know. But I'm getting a lot of problems, and they are reoccurring as well. I had one that I'm reporting again, that when I report it, they go out and do it, and then the following week it isn't done again. So I'm thinking that this is probably people that we're taking on temporary, although they should have a list in front of them that tells them, and they should know what to do, but quite clearly it's not happening. So it is, as has been stressed, it is important that we do what we say we do, whether it be temporary staff or not. The other thing is about the list of people where they can't empty bins, and many a time it's to do with they can't get in the street or whatever, if it's blocked, particularly just where you enter a road or a street. I wondered what was happening about, we had, it was mentioned that certain roads where there is a constant problem, it will be looked at to put yellow lines, for instance, at the top of the roads or whatever. And I think this seems to have stopped within the pandemic. I know that some have been done, but it seems there's others that's still to do. And so I just wondered if anybody could sort of update me on that. Thank you.
If you can update Councillor Blackburn on the first one as clear as you can. In terms of the second one, I think that'll be partially covered by our parking paper as well. To which Mark Jefford is coming. To which Mark Jefford is coming in, and also other officers. But I mean, John, if you can explain the first one and then give a reassurance as to what you're doing about the TROs.
Yeah, of course, Chair. Yeah, as I've already said, we recognise the fact that that things such as assisted collections in these times become the more difficult parts of the service to keep up to. We recognise the priority and importance of them, and I'll again repeat the assurances that we're doing all we can to try and improve that, and we recognise that it needs to improve more. So to recognise that the specific example given by Councillor Blackburn, obviously it's difficult for me to comment on that. I don't think that's a particularly common thing. I'm surprised to hear that a crew has obviously said the wrong thing, that it's not their job. I'm not sure that'll necessarily be an agency staff, and we'd always look into individual reports of that if they pass to us, and make sure that any crew members, if they have indeed said that, which of course they may not have done, then we'd always correct that. I don't think that's something that's causing the problem myself. I don't think it's a case that these crews not knowing and thinking they should do it. I think it's just a logistical issue of crews knowing on that route which is their assisted collections or not, that we need to make sure that they've got that right information. In terms of the TRO, not sure how much Mark Jefford, to be fair, will be able to update on that because he's not been directly involved, it's been Highways led. But the last information I had with colleagues in Highways was that they're cracking on with that, and they've completed most of the first phase TRO in the wards and the locations that were agreed as part of phase 1. So if Councillor Blackburn wants to get in touch, or I'll make a note to look at what was planned for her area. Each set of ward members should have received notification quite a while ago around, as part of the consultation process, the locations in their wards. So Councillor Blackburn should have that. If there are any particular locations she was expecting yellow lines to be painted that haven't happened, then we'll look into that. Be surprised. The issue more will be phase 2, and we'll be having discussions with Highways around that soon, around the next set of locations and how we gather that intelligence from a crew viewpoint in terms of consistent fails, and also again how we consult with members around the second phase. But I'll perhaps speak to Councillor Blackburn outside the meeting regarding a particular issue. That's okay, Chair.
That's fine, thank you. Councillor Howley.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to reiterate, first of all, that point.
Chair, I'm sorry, can I just come in very, very quickly? What's just been said about the assisted collections, I must stress that this lady who was in her 80s said to me word for word what I have reported. I would not definitely want to say that this lady was making it up, because most clearly to me she wasn't. She's in genuine what she said, and so it isn't made up by me, and I'm sure it isn't made up by the resident, so I'm sure what she said will have been right. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I think we've all got issues. Councillor Howley.
Thank you, Chair. Just to very quickly reiterate, while the service is experiencing problems, I think huge thanks to John and his team for maintaining it to such a high standard in these difficult times. 2 quick questions. One is, I've had a case of an entire street being missed. When residents reported it, they were told there wasn't enough resource to get it corrected, to get a recovery in place. When I raised it, it was dealt with within 24 hours. I don't want to drag up individual cases, but would like to ask, is there a criteria for allocating provision to recoveries when clearly the service is stressed? And a second quick question, do we as yet have a timetable for getting those areas of the city that are still on monthly recycling collections up to weekly collections? Thank you. Sorry, fortnightly connections.
Okay, Chair. If I answer those 2 points, then so the first example, Councillor Howley, around the missed street and the messages that it appears that the residents have had, that is wrong. So I'd be quite happy to look into the individual case to understand how that message has been given to them. What's possible is that the message that's given to people where they report an individual missed bin would be that message. That at the moment, it's very unlikely we can go out and recover an individual bin, and that would be a message that I'd support if that had been given by whoever they've been speaking to. But if they had reported it or gone online or spoke to someone at the customer contact around a missed street, then they shouldn't have been told that. Certainly as a standard response, unless there was something very specific we knew about that meant we couldn't recover that street. But the response should have been, as you got the response, well, no, we're still recovering missed streets. The only exception possibly would be when we were really up against it. We were part half-term week was really difficult in terms of getting enough backups, and we've always said all along that the order priority will be black, green, brown. So if we were really, really struggling and we couldn't get enough backups to recover garden waste, that's the service that would potentially say, look, I'm afraid we just can't get anyone out. But I'm only aware of one particular route that's happened in the city since we started garden waste collections. So again, that shouldn't have been the message given. So happy to look at that, Councillor Howley, if you want to send me the details behind the scenes, so because I'd like to know and to look at how that's happened.
Thank you.
I've done it again. I forgot about the second
on.
point. What was the second point again? Sorry, Councillor Howley.
Right. Well, very, very quickly, I'll check the details of the communication that went to refuse. If it was that they only reported the one bin rather than the entire street, I won't take it any further because we know why it was dealt with. The second one is any update on when we can get fortnightly recycling?
Yeah. So the stock answer is that that's part of the route review work to try and, without going through the whole route review reasons for it again, but as we know, pre-pandemic, we were on with the route review. We'd done the garden waste, ready to roll that out, and we're moving on to black and green bins. And as part of that route review, it's about looking at the capacity across the whole city, new builds in particular, how to access routes, etc. So as part of all that, we can also revisit those areas that were excluded from the original alternative week collections and work with members at a local level on streets they want adding as part of that review. Then we can redesign the collection routes to include those areas. What's difficult for us to do is in the meantime just move bits over, but it's not impossible that the odd street, for example, could move over to alternative week collection if we can just do some negotiations with the crews at the moment to say, right, well, can we shift that to there and it won't affect your capacity and lead to fails on other days. So it's not impossible for us to do things before the review on a case-by-case basis. And I know that yourself, Councillor Howley, have raised a number of times now the possibility in your patch. So I'll have a look again at the streets you've raised. It might be a case of just saying, look, if we can't do them all, if nothing, can we do one or two or three, and where would they be? But the default answer will be that it'll have to wait to the review. We're looking now, in terms of the route review, at trying to get it started again. Obviously, every time, this applies to everybody, every time we think we're just near the end now or getting to a stage where things will start to get so much better, we get knocked back a little bit. So it's very difficult at the moment. So if we had started the route review now, we would have had to stop it anyway this last couple of weeks because things are getting very difficult again. But I'm hoping we can pull together a project team that have been working with James on that in terms of trying to identify a separate project team and resource for that. Because our problem at the moment is if we start the review, it'll pull a lot of experienced staff that we need away from what basically is still not crisis management, but it's still, all hands on deck in terms of all the issues that have been raised today at the meeting. So I'm hoping to get the review started in the next few weeks again, but realistically, it'll take several months to complete the review for black and green bins. It's a massive project, a massive technical exercise. We need to involve all the crews in the discussions, 60, 70 crews, and getting them in for half a day each. And again, at the moment, that's why one of the reasons we suspended it. Now's not the time to be calling crews out of their main job. We just haven't got that capacity to bring them off the main job and have those conversations and discuss with them the issues. But I'm hoping that we can get cracking, and I'm hoping that certainly I would hope by the end of this year, we'll be in a much better position. We move into the new depot office facility, hopefully March, April-ish time next year. That will be a great time to have got everything introduced and start afresh, if you like, with new routes. But I'd be hopeful we can do something before then. But I'll have those discussions with you outside the meeting, Councillor. If there's anything at all we can do in your area.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Akhtar? Javed, are you there? He did indicate via the chat function that he wanted to come in. Okay, right. So anything else on page 56, 57? 58? Sorry, Councillor Ritchie? Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
slow again there. I was 57. Yeah, it's just on the parking, just a couple of questions. Bullet point 1, in terms of residential permit areas, are we confident, officers, that we assess these in a fair and equitable way across the city? One of the criteria that's been pointed out to me is that if streets have off-road parking, that they don't qualify. And yet I was wandering around Wetherby one sunny Sunday and walked along a residential street with off-street parking with a nice permit scheme. So that's the first question. The second question, on the permit scheme for free parking for ultra low emission vehicles, I'm not sure how long you intend to keep going with that. Obviously, as more electric vehicles come on, there'll presumably be a tipping point. The concerns I have with this is the challenge of pollution isn't just about exhaust emissions, it's also about particulate matter. And that's as bad in an electric vehicle as it is in a petrol or diesel vehicle, I imagine, because it's related to braking, clutch operations and the road surface wear. So it's not doing anything to encourage people onto public transport, which obviously if you've got 70 people on a bus rather than 70 electric vehicles, there'll be less particulate matter. And the other aspect of that, as well as the particulate matter, is congestion. So again, if we're all in electric vehicles, we'll still be stuck in the traffic, and congestion is a big cost to business in the city. So while I see the benefits of that policy, I don't think it can go on forever. And I just wondered what your thoughts are. Is there a tipping point, and is there a point where you'll be reviewing it? Thank you.
Fine. Now, I know that John Mulcahy and Mark Jefford have come in on the call. Unless they've enlarged their areas of responsibility, I think we need, are either Kate Morris or Nick Hunt in the call in the background at all?
Yes, I am, Councillor. This is Kate Morris. Can you see and hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Right, fine. You've heard the issue, and obviously Nick's in the call as well. So you've heard the strategic point that's being made. Is there anything you can say? And I accept that you've hardly got your feet underneath the table, and all of a sudden we're assaulting you. But I mean, it's so. What can you add?
Well, I would certainly, hello everybody, and thank you for that caveat that it's day 13. So just to put some context around it, a very valid point about the congestion element of it, and I share that concern. I think electric vehicles are seen as the saviour of everything. They are one element of it. But I think, we do need to do a lot of work to ensure what we are trying to aim to do is reduce the number of car trips, regardless of kind of how they are powered. And as I said, you're right, congestion still impacts on reliability and all of those other sorts of areas. What I can do, if others on the call from my side are unable to answer the particular question about particulates, I can certainly come back to Councillor Ritchie with a response to that question.
Okay. Nick, is there anything you can add?
No, not really, Councillor, not on that particular element.
No, that's fine. So, yeah, if you could speak to Councillor Ritchie outside of the meeting on that particular point. Okay, so now, Councillor Akhtar, are you there now?
Sorry, and then the parking permit question as well.
The parking permit, who's going to deal with the parking permit?
Sorry, Nick? I missed the first element of that. Sorry, that question, Councillor Ritchie.
So I was asking if the policy was implemented equally throughout the city. So one of the criteria I've been knocked back on is when there's off-street parking on streets. And yet I was walking around Wetherby and I found a suburban street or estate with off-road parking and a parking permit scheme in there. It's just that I know in my ward, we've got very few parking permit schemes. I think there's about 3 actually in the whole ward. And yet we have a train station, which causes issues where there's no parking and spillage from shopping centres and whatnot, just the same as any other area in Leeds, really. So I just wondered if it's been implemented consistently.
It is, Councillor. All I can say is probably it's a historical one that was developed before the policy was introduced. So there's an element of permit parking schemes, historical permit parking schemes that at the present time probably no longer serve a purpose or don't meet our current criteria. But the criteria that we have adopted now is adopted evenly across all 33 wards.
Could I just add to that? 'Cause I think is what you're saying, Councillor, that those vehicles parked off-road had permits as well? Because my understanding is around a scheme, the permits only apply to the vehicles parked on the highway. So if you have the ability to park off-street, you don't require a permit. Was that the basis of the question? Or not? Have I misinterpreted that? Apologies.
No, the basis of the question is why is a street with off-road parking in Wetherby got a parking permit scheme, which are reviewed every 3 years, I think, Nick. So I'm not sure why an historic one would still be in place compared with other streets that don't. And in terms of implementing schemes, I know that in Horsforth, with the opening of the Kirkstall Forge station, parking permit schemes were implemented on the streets nearby very quickly due to overspill and the lack of capacity in the car park. And yet when I asked for a review of the streets around Bramley station, which has a much smaller car park and we have the same spillage, it was turned down. This is why I asked the question about the equal implementation of the criteria in the policy, because my anecdotal or my evidence is that it's not.
Yeah, I can answer that. So, Kate, just to clarify, is for consideration of residential permit parking, we have a 3-stage criteria that has to be met. So we have to demonstrate that there's an all-day parking problem linked to a major traffic generator, be that a train station, hospital, etc. The residents don't have any alternative off-street parking provision, and that when residents return to their street, they're unable to park within close proximity to their home. And if they meet all of those 3 criteria through the evidence that we gather through on-site surveys, then it enables us to then recommend that location to be considered for permit parking. If it doesn't meet all of those 3 criteria, then it's very difficult to put a business case forward for that intervention. In regards to a 3-year review, Council, that you mentioned, once we introduce a scheme, particularly a permit parking scheme or a waiting restriction scheme, that we do a stage 2 and stage 3, a stage 4 and stage 5 safety audit. And if no issues are highlighted then that scheme just stays in until issues arise. So we don't review them every 3 years. I'm more than happy to meet you on site and walk through around Bramley Station. I know we've done quite a lot of surveys in the past, and if that situation has changed, I'm more than happy to review that.
Thank you. Councillor Akhtar, are you there?
Yeah. Sorry, last time Kevin obviously beaten me to it by the time I was trying to unmute Chair. But obviously my concern is, and to be honest with you, sometimes I don't understand. I mean, we're so close to the city centre, and the parking is becoming a nightmare, not only for local residents but also for the people who have a vehicle to park, and when they come back, there isn't a spot, and also people parking on the pavements. And now, surely, it could be a police matter. Sorry.
Yeah, Javed, can we wait till we get to the parking strategy item on that one? Because that is the whole point of the item we've got on parking strategy.
I'll wait for that, sir.
Yeah, that's fine. Councillor Gabriel?
Sorry, I'm talking on page 59.
Yeah, fire away.
I'm talking Parks and Countryside in section 45, right at the very end. It said the service will not be supplying and maintaining floral decorations in the city centre and surrounding area this summer and spring. I want to ask, I know Sean isn't here, but I'll need to find out, is this to be the case going forward, or will it be reinstated next year?
James?
No, this was just related to the restrictions that are in place this year and the operational staffing issues that we had. Clearly, there were some budgetary decisions that we took in February, which has a separate impact on some of those services, but this is just referring to the growing season that we were in and the resources that we had available. So it was just a pause for this year.
Okay, can I just make sure that's minuted somewhere?
That's fine, thank you. Right, anything else on page 60? No, yeah, Councillor Ritchie.
Sorry, it's actually page 59.
Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah, just on the Parks and Countryside, it is the performance report. I just wondered if we monitored the numbers of parks that are at the Leeds Park standard, because that were a target that they all would be by 2020, which I know we missed for various reasons, and there's a new park strategy. And it's just not in this report. Now, I know it's previously when I was a community committee chair back in the day, we came to community committee and what have you. I would have thought it'd be something that you'd record on here. And things like repair, times for repairs and what have you to play areas, vandalism, things like that might be appropriate to report on.
James?
Yeah, we certainly have the data in terms of the park standard, and that can be easily added, and we can take away the other suggestions and see if we can provide that as additional information in the report. Tim will take that away, I'm sure.
I was going to say, Tim, have you got a note of that one too?
I've certainly made a note of that. I remember from the days of the annual performance report, we'd include things like the Green Flag Park Award information. So we'll pass it on to the Parks and Countryside team. We'll pick that up. And we'll also pick up Councillor Ritchie's early point about including the units on the tables as well.
Okay, good. Okay, unless anybody's got any other questions. Oh, Councillor Reagan.
Looking at this particular report, there's no information around weed spraying. And I think weed spraying is a really particular issue for our residents within their within the area. So I'd like to see some performance around weed spraying in future.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yes, I would agree with that. Right. If nobody's got any other questions on that, can I thank the officers who have been in attendance for the performance report? It, you know, there's a lot of detail in here. A lot of work has gone in by Tim and his team in order to pull it together. And obviously the departments themselves have had to provide a lot of effort into it. It is appreciated on here. It's also quite good to see that even though we went through, there are a lot of pages, which meant that in general, you know, as a scrutiny board, we were satisfied with the performance, and where there isn't satisfaction with performance, we have had an opportunity to raise any views and concerns and to make positive and negative comments accordingly. So can I thank everyone for that? So I can now move on to the next item, which is the LASBAT review. So Mr. Money and Claire Smith, do you want to introduce yourselves, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Hi, everyone. I apologise about my network connection a little earlier when we were doing the introductions, but hopefully it'll be okay now. I'm Paul Money, Chief Officer for the Safer, Stronger Communities team. And as Chair's just said there, I'm joined by my colleague, Claire.
Good morning, everybody. It's Claire Smith here, the interim head of safety, neighbourhoods and antisocial behaviour. I'd just like to also apologise for the banging in the background. I think my next door neighbours have just started some building work, so apologies in advance.
Good. Oh well, that said then, Claire, are you leading on this item?
Paul's going to do the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Right. Oh, right. Paul.
Yes, Jeff, that's okay. And thanks to Becky for the IT and technical support that I certainly need around this presentation. And just to reassure colleagues, it'll take me 5 minutes or thereabouts to run through this very short PowerPoint, but it might prove quite helpful if members can see the PowerPoint. Just to I suppose just to put in context, the work that we've been doing with the LASBAT service, and we'll also touch on some wider work around the strategic approach to ASB in the city that we felt we needed to address, and also bring you up to speed with the implementation of the recommendations from the review. So if Becky's okay, just moving us on one slide, just in terms of the rationale underpinning the review itself. Well, pretty much upon taking up my role, it became clear, both from some performance data and from colleagues working in LASBAT, that we needed to undertake a full service review. As you can see there from the bullet points, the service was under some significant demand pressures, with worries about our sustainability in terms of structure. Also the sense that LASBAT really was the one and only place really where ASB was being sort of dealt with, and we recognised there was some opportunities to work more collegiately with partners and other services within the council around some of the more significant strategic ASB issues. So, for example, the antisocial use of motor vehicles, that type of thing, where we could improve the service that we were delivering through that. I touched on the demand issue in terms of volume, but also what we were identifying through the work we were doing was that there was an increased vulnerability from customers and callers from their perspective that we were kind of picking up, and we didn't think our arrangements that we had in place at the time suitably addressed and identified some of that vulnerability quickly enough, which led to all sorts of issues. So we also picked that piece of work up as well. Let's move on to slide 3, if that's okay. So key areas of focus for us within the review. We set a steering group up. We were supported by elected members, in particular referenced Councillor Reagan, who was very helpful in terms of the member perspective on this. But through that steering group, the work developed and some key areas of focus emerged for us. You can see what they are on that PowerPoint slide there. The triage process really is the development that looks to address the early identification of vulnerability and risk, and do that at point the incident is referred to us, so as soon as is possible really, and that triage system is certainly a significant development for us. The community MARAC as well is where we now take the more complex and indeed high risk cases where we're struggling to get resolutions. So the community MARAC provides us with an opportunity to have some further conversation with key partners about what else we could try to do. Mediation speaks for itself. We haven't introduced the mediation service just yet, but we're looking to do that in the most effective way that we can do, as a useful, very early intervention for a significant number of our cases. The review of noise, and with this we're talking about domestic noise, but this links to another review that we're doing at Leeds Watch, where the noise service actually operates, but some developments around our processes there. We felt we could support members from an internal comms point of view much more effectively than we had been doing, and we think we've tried to make some inroads into that now, and it's very much a work in progress. But communication from an internal and indeed external perspective were areas that we felt we were underdeveloped in terms of our approach. Some work done to relocate one of the teams to a more to work in concert more closely with housing colleagues in particular, because we see the significance of that link with housing and want to develop that more and more. Also helps with the best use of office space. And then, as has been touched on already, a wider development of a strategy. I'll just move on to what is essentially the last slide, you'd be delighted to know. Basically just to say that whilst we're implementing the recommendations, there are some significant links to other areas of activity that continue to be very much an evolving and work in progress agenda. The reducing reoffending, drugs and alcohol, youth justice partnership work, have always been pretty significant for us from a community safety point of view. But the developments around the links with the ASB and organised crime are also areas that we are looking to develop and progress. And there are a number of ways we can disrupt organised crime in various different ways, using the resources that we've got focused on the ASB agenda. And lastly, again, and to some degree this links closely with the housing link, but we recognise there were opportunities to work more closely around gypsy and traveller issues and arrangements, and that work has been developing as well. Okay, I think there is just one slide, which is that one, which is about questions. I hope that's been helpful in terms of a quick fly-through, Chair. Sorry it has been quick, but I know colleagues are pretty well sighted on this stuff. I'm happy to take any questions with my colleague Claire, who leads on ASB for us across the city.
Fault. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for that presentation. So yeah, on page 77 of the agenda pack, I'd just like to really very much welcome the Noise app being trialled, because I think what's mentioned about the diary sheets, we are forever getting feedback with regards to these diary sheets having to be filled in and things like that. And as is also mentioned, like they're not seen as being of any use, like because they're not verifiable or anything. So like I think that will go a long way to building up confidence in the service. And also when you're keeping a diary sheet, people might just keep the diary sheet and don't necessarily report at the same time because they think they've maybe misunderstood what the process is. So I'd like to really welcome that. That's a really good move forward with tackling noise nuisance. I also want to welcome working closer with housing, because again, without that joined up approach, it's very difficult to get a handle on these things. I do have a question about the malicious, vexatious and or repetitive allegations. So I don't know how you would separate out a malicious or vexatious allegation from a repetitive one, because if someone has pretty much constant noise nuisance next door, how would you tell if that's vexatious or not? That's my main question on that point, please.
Am I okay to come in there, Councillor, with regards to that?
Yeah.
So thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Brooks. Really looking forward to the Noise app as well ourselves. Definitely going to be a help going forward. With regards to the vexatious complaints as well, something that the Noise app can identify, as can the noise monitoring equipment, is if some noise monitoring equipment is installed into your property and then you complain about noise nuisance to do with the next door neighbour, we're able to identify whether that is actually from a neighbour or from an individual's property themselves. We have come up against some occasions where the complainant's actually making noise within their own property. To be honest with you, it's not very often at all, but if they're making noise within their own property, we're able to identify that as be it from the neighbour that they're actually complaining about.
Okay. Are you okay, Kelly, or you're moving?
Sorry, no, that's interesting. I don't know how you would be able to tell through an app, like whether that's vexatious or not.
You're able to tell because obviously the officers that we have that are more experienced around noise, if it's from a neighbouring property, is slightly more muffled because there's a dividing wall between the properties, whereas it's within the person's own property, it's really, really clear. So that's how we're able to differentiate between the both.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Howley.
Thank you, Chair. I was a little bit, shall I say, disappointed that the report said you weren't exploring mediation at this time, as I see that as a really powerful investment that can repay by nipping things in the bud. So I am heartened that you raised that in the presentation, but could you add any more detail as to timescales, how heavily you're investing in this as a way forward, what the proposals are?
Yeah, just with regards to the mediation contracts, it was something that we did start doing a procurement exercise pre-COVID, but then obviously COVID hit and it kind of put a lot of things on hold. We identified there was some financial concerns around that, but we do identify, and following a meeting obviously with Councillor Anderson, we do identify that this early intervention method is, absolutely necessary to resolving a case at such an early stage. So because we already started at the majority of the exercise pre-COVID, we're actually in a position now where we can just go out and try and procure that exercise. And that's because we've had a meeting with our finance advisors with regards to realigning some budgets. So we are in a good position that we should be able to move that forward pretty quick. I don't have exact timescales, but that should be in place because obviously, the lifting of lockdown as well, we identify it's really important we get that in as early as we can.
Thank you. All right, I've got a couple of points. One is, Claire, can you explain about your new website and also the decision tree that you put? I had the benefit of getting a briefing on this paper, so that's why I'm bringing it to everybody else's attention in case you hadn't read that part. So can you just explain what's happening with your website and your decision tree?
Yes, so we during the pandemic, we've had the opportunity to be able to develop the website that we have in place. So previously, it was a website that you were able to access, and if noise was an issue, there was a telephone number to contact, telephone number to ring, or you could email direct through. Now there's a decision tree, so when you log in any noise issues, if it's something that we feel that maybe a customer can resolve themselves initially, there's the advice given there to customers. It's a little bit more, it's a lot smarter than what was in place before. So all the information that's kind of logged is, a customer's perspective, exactly what's kind of going on. That information comes through to what's called our customer contact system. It's called CATS. That goes straight through to the team, whereas we're able to kind of monitor performance that way as well. As previously it was going through to an email and we weren't necessarily calculating that information was coming through. It's a lot more user friendly. We have seen an increase in the number of complaints coming through since we've developed this website, and I think that is because of an increase in public confidence, that there is a way to report, and there is, if it's a commercial noise as well, there is information on there around what the legislation is around commercial noise. So a customer may feel that actually they don't necessarily need to make that contact because that information is already there for them on our website.
That's right. I mean, the only suggestion I can make is, if you have issued this to members previously, can I suggest that you reissue it again, because certainly this member missed it. So it would be good to remind us of what is available for our use. Now, the second thing is working alongside your housing colleagues. What I find sometimes a bit of a frustration is that tenants will raise a concern, and then we ask the tenant to fill out a diary. Some tenants don't want to fill out a diary. So what sort of working relationship do you have with housing to go around neighbours to find out whether or not there are any problems, any issues that need to be reported in, that some people, for fear, may not want to take it any further, but if they get a conversation on the doorstep, you might be able to pick up something. So it's improving the working relationship and the processes and procedures. Is there anything you can add about that or not?
Yes, so I feel like we've got a really good working relationship with housing, and obviously now they're under the same directorate as ours as well. That can only improve going forward. There are some complex cases that are not always kind of as straightforward and easy to kind of manage. But with regards to going out into the estates directly with housing, we recently did an operation in the east, and that was housing officers and the Lasback case officers going out, and they were doing door knocking exercise because it was identified there were some issues in a particular area. I know Councillor Reagan, you were kind of heavily involved in that as well, weren't you? So, and again, it's just about increasing public confidence. So, customers are, feel confident reporting things through to ourselves. As well, on our website, people are able to report anonymously if they don't directly want to speak to ourselves or to housing. Whilst it is difficult for us to progress those cases because we're unable to go back to the complainant to tell them of the action that we're taking, we do actually take that information to our tasking, where there's arrangements, and there's a different number of partners kind of working in that area, and then any tactical responses will be discussed there. But if there's any specific areas that anybody's got concerns about, I'm more than willing to kind of look. We used to have what was called Operation Champions in areas where there was identified as if there were quite a number of issues, and that's something we're looking at implementing again, given lockdown easing.
That's fine. That's fine. Right. Anybody get any other questions or observations on this? I mean, for those of you who have been on this panel for some time, we were there at the beginning, where we were asked for our views at the beginning. We have shaped this, and if not 100% of what we said, at least 99% of what we've said has been incorporated in, or a variation on what we've done. So we have been responsible for shaping this, as have a number of other people in the council as well. I'm not just saying it was just down to scrutiny, but I think the officers have listened, they have reacted, and they are trying to come up with a service that is more fit for purpose, particularly on the noise nuisance side, which we're all getting it. And also, I think in a way, that a lot of individual neighbours have been having a number of conflicts recently because of mental health issues in some cases. And, we're needing to make sure that we've got a system that is fit for purpose. And at the moment, I'll not give you 10 out of 10 yet, but you're probably 9 out of 10. There's always room for improvement. We can always try and squeeze that little bit extra out of you. But if there's nothing else anybody wants to add, can I thank both Claire and Paul for coming today, and do appreciate the work that you've done. And if you can reissue the information about the website, and whenever you are launching your noise app, I think that again will be another tool that a number of members will be able to use and suggest to people that they use, and give you additional evidence as well. So thank you very much on that one. Thank you. So I can now move on to parking strategy. So all right, Mark, can you introduce yourself, please? First of all, Mark Jefford.
Yes, morning everybody. I'm Mark Jefford. I'm Parking Service Manager.
And can I properly welcome Kate Morris to the Scrutiny Board. Kate has taken over from Andrew Hall. She's obviously up for a challenge. I'll say that for her. She's obviously up for the challenge. So, Kate, would you like to introduce yourself, and also just briefly introduce where you originate from? I know where you've come from because it was explained to me, but just so that people can see your background.
Of course, yes. So as I said before, I'm Kate Morris. So my previous role was with ACOM, where it sounds very grand. I was head of strategic planning and advisory across Europe, Middle East and Africa. I've been within the industry for probably 30 plus years, shall we? I graduated with a degree in civil engineering from Manchester in the late 80s, started my career in the public sector as a trainee at Kent County Council, moving around all the highways and transport departments. I then worked for a period in Hong Kong. I worked in London, working on big schemes like the rollout of the red routes in Lambeth, London Bus Priority Network, various other bits. Came back up to Yorkshire. I'm originally from Yorkshire. You'll be pleased to know my mother-in-law lives in Cookridge, Councillor Anson. So I know the area well, and kind of from then I've been working up here, and obviously with a wider remit, but very much been involved in projects around Leeds to date. I was part of the team that developed the Leeds Southern Access, worked on regeneration projects in Holbeck, Dewsbury Road, and was part of bringing together the initial West Yorkshire Transport Fund submission as well. So it's great to be back working and kind of assisting in terms of making the city great and helping to achieve kind of our net zero targets come 2030. So as I said, day 13, so please bear with me, but I'm sure I will speak to a number of you over the coming weeks and months.
Thank you. Nick, I think everybody knows you, but on you go, Nick.
Nicholas Hunt, Traffic Engineering Manager for Leeds.
Thank you. And John?
Good morning, everybody. John Mulcahy, Chief Officer, Elections and Regulatory.
Okay, so what this was about is that a number of months ago, we raised concerns about parking to start off with within the inner core of the city, that because the council had made some policy decisions, a number of people were then parking further and further out. So there was concerns about how they go about getting schemes. There were concerns about the enforcement of it. How often are you getting out to enforce? Because with the greatest will in the world, Mark Jefford does not have an army of people. And the more double yellow lines that and traffic regulation orders we get put in the city, it stretches his resources. And so there was concern over that. There was also major concerns at a number of our towns and villages, the Horsforths, the Pudses, and we've heard about Bramley this morning as well, where there were additional problems as well. Maybe not the same as the ones in the city centre, but problems all the better for the residents that live in those areas. So we asked if we could commission this particular report. This was commissioned, and Gillian MacLeod and Mark Jefford jointly came up with the report that you've got in front of you. So it's now open to members' questions and queries on anything. Now, Councillor Akhtar, are you there?
I am, Chair, but can you allow me 2 minutes, and I'll come back, please, sir.
I'll come back, right. So in that case, Councillor Reagan.
We did speak earlier around the issues of parking, and specifically, like the chair's just alluded to, the city centre and it coming out and spilling out into the inner areas. And specifically, my concern is about my particular ward, as in Bermontos and Richmond Hill, in the Lincoln Green, and it has the highest rate of multi-stories. And there's a lot of new developments taking place in and around there, as in the Mabgate area. And all this is doing is this parking strategy. All it's doing at the moment is it's expanding, and it's going into the areas where we haven't got facilities for parking. So I'd like to see something done about, like what was explained before, where you've got a tower block that's got 100 dwellings. It necessarily, when they were built, they didn't have, there maybe was only about 6 or 7 cars. Now within that 100 dwelling multi-storey, there's maybe 300 cars there, because there's families living in there, but there's also the spillage from the city centre where they are parking on there, where there's no traffic regulation orders, and they are as well parking on the green spaces and churning all that little green space that we've got. So it's really difficult to look at how we can collectively as a group look at how we can do something about the parking within these areas.
Nick, do you want to deal with that?
I totally agree with you, Councillor. I think it is an ongoing challenge. There is plans to regenerate the Mabgate area, and I'm sure colleagues in our planning service area will be probably restricting parking because of its close proximity to the city centre. I know there's a mini Holland style scheme going down Mabgate, which again provides a much improved pedestrian cycle link from the hospital to the city centre, and again discourages car usage for these developments adjacent. But it is an ongoing piece of work. The city centre seems to have grown. We used to have a city centre core, but we are currently reviewing that to see where the true city boundary is, and that will then help link in regards to parking policy and planning policy. So there is a work in progress to try and overcome some of these challenges that we face.
Can I come back on that, Chair?
Yes. Yes.
Because I think there's an issue that you need to link in, Nick, with housing and housing development, because we need to look collectively about what spaces and what areas within that, because I agree, you know, we are developing a Mabgate, but all we're going to do is push the problem further back onto Macaulay Street and to the other areas of Lincoln Green. So we really need to look at the whole big picture of, because we've got the hospital there as well within St James's, so we've got a lot of extra cars parking because of visiting and because of working at the hospital. So it's a real nightmare for us in that lower area of Bermondsey and Richmond Hill.
Yeah, I agree, Councillor. We have introduced permit parking schemes in your ward, as you're aware, around there. And we've also worked with the hospital in regards to creation of additional parking for their staff. We've also created, along further down Cherry Row, etc., more on-street paying display opportunities for staff and visitors to the hospital. But it is a work in progress and we continue to review.
Okay. Councillor Ritchie.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, just to acknowledge and celebrate the success of the park and ride schemes. They really have taken off, haven't they? And I remember those early council meetings when Ellen Road started, and the stick that the then exec member were getting from some sides of the chamber, you know, saying how rubbish it was, and it's really taken off. But just an appeal on that we haven't really got anything significant in the West, and I think we should. I know there's some work around Pudsey, perhaps expanding at Pudsey Station, but there are a couple of other sites. Again, sorry to be parochial, but there is a site near Bramley Station which is designated as employment land but isn't being used. That could become a park and ride scheme, which should also serve the A647 corridor and the investment that's going in there. But actually, the main point I want to raise is on parking hierarchy and disabled car parking. I think it's high time that we utilise the technology available to come up with a way of displaying where the parking disabled bays are, basically. At the moment, it's a downloadable PDF type document, which isn't dynamic in any way, shape or form, and it's probably already outdated. So we've got all this technology now. We've got the tree mapping, ward boundaries, you know, live, interactive almost, and we need to do the same for disabled parking. And also, you could utilise when it's full, if there's any temporary closures and what have you, because, you know, people with some disabilities, that's their only option of getting into Leeds. So I urge you to progress that, and it's something Nick will know has been raised at our street charter meetings, which I've been chairing as disability champion. So quick progress on that, please. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor, we have done some pilot and trials in the city centre with a private operator, which places sensors in the parking bays, so you can have a real-time interactive map. So particularly for disabled people, if they're wanting to head into the city centre, we can give an indicative area which may be free for them to aim towards to park conveniently. That again, unfortunately, through COVID has slowed down to some extent, but it is something that we want to explore. As you say, technology is moving forward, and is this a trick that we're not picking up at the moment? But we have been piloting it, and it has been successful in some elements.
Okay. Right, Councillor Gabriel.
Good morning, and I'm afraid I'm going to be a bit provincial as well. We've been trying to get, as you know, Nick, Holbeck is really, I mean, you couldn't get closer to the city centre. And now they're bringing the South Bank more and more into Holbeck. We are getting totally clogged up with residents parking. And as you know, people parking. And as you know, when you put residents park in one place, all it does is just move it along. And the road in particular is Holbeck Moor Road, that about 4 or 5 years ago was going to get what do you call them, parking meters, but they were going to charge like £1 for 8 hours. So we said that you just having a revenue source rather than solving the problem. So we suggested, and I keep suggesting, that we want time limited parking, so they can only park there for 2 or 3 or 4 hours, which would stop those that work in the city centre. Now we keep backing it back to highways, and they keep batting it back out into the long grass. So I'm just batting it back in again.
Well,
and I'm not going away.
No, well, as you're aware, we've got a significant improvement scheme in the recreations planned, and that will see whole-scale TRO changes also. So we will look to incorporate changes on Holbeck Street, Holbeck Moor Road, as part of those works. We're now that we're coming out of the COVID, we're just consolidating all of the feedback from the extensive public consultation we did on the recreations. And then we'll shortly, within the next week or two, we'll be bringing those schemes forward to yourselves and your colleague to discuss.
Can I have that minute, please?
Yeah, good. Okay, right now. So, can I come? You in now, Councillor Actor? On you go.
Yeah, I am. I do apologise for that, sir. Now, I mean, to be honest with you, sometimes I feel that what I raise about the parking issue, it falls onto the deaf ears. Once upon a time, I think it was in 2019, money was approved. And I've said this on many occasions, and this forum and other forums as well. Money was improved closer to the university areas to be improved for the parking issues. And since then, the wonderful officer that we had who was doing the scheme, he was moved to another department. And since then, nothing has happened with regards to that scheme at all. Now, as you can understand, Barry, people like myself, all the elected members, we are responsible to our local residents. If I write a letter to all the street or everyone in the locality and say this scheme will be happening in such a time, 2 years down the road, I'm knocking on their door and they're asking me the question, I think it's unfair, and it's about time that Nick and his department needs to take some action. Another thing is to do with the parking services, Mark. You've been absolutely fantastic as an officer. But then again, we are getting a lot of complaints from our block of flats where residents having problem trying to use their wheelchairs or the push chairs or whichever angle that you look at it, when people leave their cars parked on the pavements and go to town for shopping or either for work. Can we work along with the colleagues at the police and see if we can address this particular issue? But with regards to the parking problem in our ward, is one of the worst problems that we've got in the area. I can name 9 to 10 different hotspots where we are having problem, lack of space for the people to park the vehicles. And even though if the mother goes to a school to drop her kids off, and by the time she's back, someone has taken her a parking spot, and she bless her, she had to park 3 streets away from where she lives. And then if it's the parking residential area, she's going to get the ticket. So I think we need to be serious about the issues, especially having a ward which is in the city center and closer to the city center as well. These, you know, we can't go along with this for too long. Thank you.
Okay. Nick, do you want to try and?
Certainly. The last time I presented to the scrutiny board, Councillor Akhtar raised the issues, and I did email him twice before COVID kicked in, asking to meet on site to walk through. Unfortunately, then COVID kicked in and we were unable to do so. The problem that we've always had in this area is we know the cost of what a TRO, an area-based TRO, this will cost. And we've managed to secure Section 106 funding that will enable us to deliver a scheme. So in March, we put a Highway Board report forward for an area-based TRO in Councillor Akhtar's ward that now enables us to address those challenging behaviours and try and restore some of that residential parking. So we have a scheme. It's being drawn up at the moment. We've done extensive surveys. We're confident there's a scheme there that will address most, if not all, of the issues. And that will be then going out to local ward members for consultation within the next 2 to 4 weeks.
If I may come back quickly, Chair, and I absolutely understand what you said twice, that you have sent me the email just before the pandemic, and then obviously pandemic has kicked in. Can I take the offer and can you please resend us another email and invite where 3 ward members can take you out for a walkabout? Now things are easing off with regards to restrictions, and get on with the business basically. So you know, it's something I feel that it's unfair on local residents and then the local business as well. So if you can agree to meet up with us, and I'm more than happy to take you around to some of the areas that I feel that those needs looking into. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to bring Councillor Hayden in at the end to basically pull everything together. So just a couple of points I would like to make myself. One is police working. There is a lot of, well, those of us who've been around for a while aren't necessarily confused, but the public are confused as to what is the responsibility of the council to enforce and what is the responsibility of the police. And certainly in my area, everybody understands yellow lines are the responsibility of Mr. Jefford to cover. But trying to get the police to take care of the inappropriate and inconsiderate parking, it'd be easier me trying to get to the moon, because they don't seem to understand the importance of it. And by continually batting back and saying, oh, it's up to highways to come up with, you know, introduce this order or that order, it isn't going to work. So how can we improve our working relationship with the police in general? And then secondly, in terms of funding, I sit on a number of plans panels, and one of the major problems I see is highways planners not asking developers for money up front to fund a lot of these schemes. Now, I think we need to get highways planners to be a little bit tougher when these applications are coming forward, so that we can secure funding to implement some of those problems that we've got into. So I don't know, those are the 2 observations I've got. I don't know who wants to answer on those points. But if there's nobody going to answer, then that's fine. That's not a problem. I'll then bring Councillor Hayden in to summarise where we are and what she's heard. So, yeah, anybody wanting to answer either of those 2 points I've raised?
I can try, Councillor. Speaking on behalf of my colleagues in Development Control, I know they do try their best to secure funding to make any form of highway improvement in the area around any development. It is an opportunity for us to get additional funding resources, and I know they do try. Without going into the technicalities, I know a lot of what they can demand or request or condition into planning applications is all linked to the scale of the development itself. But I can assure you, we do speak closely with colleagues. So from a traffic engineering point of view, we do highlight the issues in that ward, and they then try and secure funding should it be available through Section 106 contributions. But it's always an ongoing challenge, but we will continue to try and improve.
Well, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example. How come I can secure money for 2 speed indicator devices from the developers, and yet when I asked them to be done by highways, they said, "Oh no, we can't do it. Nothing, nothing we can do." Well, if I can do it, they can certainly do it, and that's just a small example of where we can get things. I know recently in my area, Mr. Waters had wanted to get access to some funding that was left lying surplus, but was told very clearly by highways planners, no, you can't touch it. Mr. Waters had some proposals that he wanted to try and implement. So that leads to frustration, because the developers say, right, fine, we've given you £200,000. If you want to spend that £200,000 on other things, they're fine, as long as it's going to the betterment of the community. So we need to have a better working relationship with them so that we can actually utilise the funding that the developers are willing to put into the pot to try and mitigate some of the problems that they admit themselves that they are actually causing locally. Anyway, so fine. In that case, I will leave the final word in this area to Councillor Hayden, who again is relatively new to the portfolio, so but she's probably had enough time now that she can start biting back.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, parking's a perennial problem, isn't it? It's and you would think it'd be one of the things that would actually get better in the pandemic when more people are staying at home. But then I don't know about anybody else, but in my area, the refuse trucks and things like that trying to get down certain streets because people were leaving their cars at home because they were working from home. A huge thanks to the service for all their work on the various schemes and for monitoring. I put my hand up earlier because Councillor Gabriel, and Councillor Reagan and Councillor Akhtar, I have heard what you said, and I will be making. I've made a note of those particular issues, but there are issues like that. And your wards are very close to the city centre, so we'll have a kind of exaggerated issues in terms of because of their proximity to the city centre. We all, it doesn't matter what ward you are, there are, and especially around schools, and Councillor Akhtar mentioned the school run and things like that, and residents who live near to schools. So there are a number of things that as a highway service that we are undertaking, such as encouraging more active travel and school streets, and making it kind of safer to have to not have to use your car all the time, and therefore not have to park it somewhere, especially in the city centre. So it's I hear it, and I empathise. I have very similar problems, if different to the city centre wards, in my own ward, and indeed where I live as well. So, but in terms of the public's perception of the police, and I often don't understand what the police can enforce and what highway parking services enforce. So I think that's something we need to get better at communicating, and in working relationship with the police as well, because that inconsiderate and inappropriate parking actually causes huge problems in our communities. So take that on board as well as working with developers to trying to get as much mitigation as we possibly can. So thank you, and thank you for all your comments, and to the team today, and for their work year in, year out.
Well, I said it was the last word, but Councillor Rafiq indicated that he wanted to come in. So Councillor Rafiq, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just on the, I mean, we get in terms of parking enforcement, you know, I mean, I've got a message from a parent governor just this morning at school in my ward, and I know that's the case around the city as well, where people, parents in particular, when picking and dropping kids at schools, you know, parking just anywhere and everywhere, and it's a particular issue. And I think when it comes to enforcement, it's a difficult. We've only got so many bodies, so many, you know, officers who can actually, you know, stretch ourselves around the city, city centre, and areas around city centre like London and Woodhouse remain a particular challenge. And then, you know, sort of branching out to all the schools, or many, about 100 schools, I think, which seem to be a challenge, but a lot of the times it's not. We can only enforce when it's yellow lines or signs people are parking. Anything other than that, if it's obstruction or payment parking, all that, or parking on a corner or something like that, where then it is the police. And I think there's that probably work, you know, we need to do in our own wards with the police, where occasionally where there's a, you know, PCSO could actually maybe do a walk around, you know, as they are out and about at a particular time of the day. So, but, you know, going back to the original point, there's so much. And even if I think, you know, it's a difficult one, you know, with the high-rise flats, I mean, you know, which tend to be all council. And Councillor Reagan said early on, there's no quick fix, there's no easy fix as well. I think with the increased sort of car ownership, and more cars actually parked at home and more people working from home, is going to be a challenge, and spaces are at a premium, unfortunately. So it is sometimes working and trying to work together to find local solutions, I'm afraid.
That's fine, thank you. And I mean, I would, you know, without enlarging the discussion too much, we need to bear in mind that certainly in a number of areas now, there is only one PCSO left, and how they are going to get, when there's 3 shifts to be covered in a day, so how they are going to get round, because if they're on for the school shift in the morning, the chances are their shift will have finished by the time it's the working time at night. So it makes it very difficult. So I do think we need to get a good relationship going with the police to try and see what we can work together, because we can't expect them to be working, you know, the PCSOs, you know, 9, 10, 11 hours because of covering the various peaks and troughs that we've got throughout the day. But personally, can I thank the officers for presenting this paper and sending it through to us. We've got here, I think, some information that we can use to our advantage as elected members, because it's in writing here. We've had a number of suggestions made today, which have hopefully been minuted, so that, for example, Councillor Gabriel can get the work done that she's been after for some time. So can I thank the officers, and can I finally, again, hopefully that Kate Morris has heard what's been said, and that she gets her feet further underneath the table, she can start coming up with some strategies to address a number of the issues and concerns that have been expressed by Scrutiny today. So thank you all very much, and thank you for your attendance. Right, item 9, sources of work. Rebecca.
Hi, Chair. This report sets out possible sources of work to inform the Scrutiny Board's work programme for the year ahead. I don't know whether you want to take it in conjunction with the following item, which provides a draft work programme for the board.
If you want to move on to item 10.
Yeah, if I can refer members to page 173 in their pack, that sets out the draft work schedule as it currently stands. As members will be aware from the pre-meeting.
Actually, believe it or not, on the pack I've got, it's page 169.
Oh, apologies. not intentionally to confuse.
This is the difference between electronic copies and paper copies. It's just, I mean, it might be 173 in some. For those of us with paper copies, it's 169.
Okay. Apologies. That draft work schedule sets out the work requests that have come into the board thus far. Councillor Anderson has had a number of conversations following agenda publication, so this draft will be updated in light of those. Members will notice at the bottom of the draft schedule there are a number of unscheduled items. Those are requests that have come in that have yet to be timetabled but are there for member reference.
Okay, so I've gone past, you know, I'm one of these chairs who likes to try and keep a meeting to 2 hours, and when it goes over 2 hours, I'll look upon it as I've not been successful in managing the meeting today. But because of the nature of the issues today, so what I would like you to do is, if you can have a look at those reports that Becky's just referred to, and if you've any comments, send them back to her or to me so that they can be fed in so that we can look and see. Because in the pre-meeting that we had, one member came up with a suggested potential area of work. So again, that was formally recognised by Becky. So she's going to try and get a position paper on that particular issue. So we need to work collegiately in getting things through. The only thing I would bring to your attention is the antisocial use of fireworks report. Has anybody got any concerns about it? We can't formally approve it until we meet in person, but are there any concerns that anybody has about that particular report? No, good. So to all intents and purposes, sorry, Councillor Ritchie.
Yeah, just very quickly, obviously as a returning member to this board, I've not had sight of that. I'll be honest, I don't check every scrutiny board's work over the last 3 years or so. Having other things to attend to. So I'd appreciate that work, because I'm sure, like many members, we've got a lot of lobbying about banning fireworks and the like over in the run-up to bonfire night. So yeah, I'd like sight of that, please. If you could send me.
It's actually, it's on, you should find, hopefully it's on page 183. Hopefully it's on page 183 of your papers. But I say hopefully because we never know where it is or whether it's electronic copies or missed. But you should hopefully find it there, Councillor Ritchie. If not, Becky will get it to you.
Sorry, remiss of me that to have not spotted that. I didn't get that far clearly.
It's okay. It's not a problem. So with that said, the next meeting we will be having is on the 15th of July. Now, because of what Boris has said at the beginning of the week, at the moment, I don't know how we're going to deal with it, because we've got a meeting of scrutiny chairs next week to try and resolve this. And as you're aware, I spoke to all of you, or most of you, to get your views on what your preferred route would be. Depending on what decisions are absolutely urgent. Now, by absolutely urgent, I mean something that's got to be done. If it's approval of the minutes, fine, I think that can be deferred so that we can make that decision at some time in the future, as long as we've commented on them. So I'm more minded to probably continue with the remote meeting in July, unless there are any decisions that we have to make as a board, but I'm certainly not aware of any at this stage, because the only one that I know of would have been the use of the fireworks. Well, if we can delay that a little bit further, we can then, it's just the formal passing of it. So presumably, Becky, can we start sending out that fireworks report to various people? So now that we've done it,
yeah, as long as the board is happy, and everyone has, the sort of previous people who've been involved who may no longer be on the board also had the copy on email back in April, as did the exec member and the chief officer. So if everyone's happy with it, I will send that out as requested to MPs, etc.
Good, that's fine, thank you. So thank you all very much for your attendance today. And as I say, I do apologise for going over the usual 2 hours. Those of you who have been on my scrutiny board beforehand, yes, Councillor Gabriel, yes, I know. I like to stick to 2 hours, and it's only rarely do I try and let it go over 2 hours, but if there's something important to be done, it's important that we do discuss it. So thank you all for your time and effort today.